But great. And I'm just so excited to talk about this topic. And even as Taylor and I were getting ready for it, I mean, we were excited because we know how important, we're going to talk about recruiting, but also the importance of retention as part of your hiring strategy. But before we jump in, we have a poll question for you. We're really curious about what is your biggest challenge today? What's your biggest challenge? Is it hiring? Bringing people in the door, filling those open jobs? Is it retaining? I know a lot of organizations are really struggling with this great resignation, or is it both?
No, I'll start by asking a question back. So how much of the biggest resignation is such a big resignation that's that impactful? I know that happened something in September, but here we are in December. Is it still, at some point, could you kind of comment on that with some data, if there is data, or you or Taylor? Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm happy to share just some thoughts. I actually read an interesting thread on Twitter last night that alluded that is the great resignation really, we deal with the hourly workforce all the time. Is the great resignation happening at all levels of the workforce? So what we're seeing here is companies that are people who might be in professional roles, who might have the money on hand to be able to go through a resignation and make a career change, as opposed to people whose hourly income might be the bare minimum that they need just to be able to survive. So I know that doesn't provide you with data, Fernando, but it does add an extra element of thinking to the topic.
Well, so a lot of these are basically transitional or temporary moves, I guess, Taylor, as you described it, for the let's call it exempt workforce.
Yeah, the way I see it is that's exactly right. It's a transitional move. They're not beholden to the job opportunity that they have right now in front of them, and they know they can go land somewhere else quickly, so they have the confidence to transition. But I think there's probably a number of more socioeconomic factors than just being disgruntled or feeling underappreciated. I think there's a lot of people that are able to leave their jobs, and there's a lot that aren't. So the great resignation, my point in that comment was just, it might not be as sweeping as everyone seems. It gives it context across the not everyone's resigning. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, what I'm seeing as well is that it may not be everybody's resigning, but there's been a lot of surveys on how many are thinking about it or planning on it as well. So just because they haven't left yet doesn't mean they're not thinking about it with these other opportunities. I think it's affecting, like you said, different industry. I know one of the industries I work in is in the IT industry, one of my clients, and they're seeing a huge impact in this great resignation as well. And I think it may also be, like you said, social and economic. The more remote opportunities there are, people have a lot more opportunities than they had before. So being in a physical location has also opened up opportunities for people. So it's real, it's happening, and it may not be happening to you, but that's a great way to think about how do we keep retaining people. Well, let me share the poll here. And can you guys see the poll, the results? Kim or Megan, are you able to see the results? Here, I'm sharing them. So it looks like over 56% say you're interested, your challenge is both, not just bringing people in the door, but keeping them as they stay in as well. And we're going to hit both of those topics. So we talked through some different strategies, some best practices, and then Taylor and I will kind of take turns a little bit talking about first hiring, some recommendations we have, best practices we've seen around hiring, and then we're going to talk about retention and some top strategies around that. But feel free to ask questions and engage through this, because we want to make sure we're providing you with the best information that we can. I'm going to share my screen here. And I had a big list on some hiring strategies and best practices, but I pared it down to the ones that I feel have the biggest impact. And so there's three. I'm going to focus on the first one. When we talk about hiring, it's not just bringing people in the door, but once you bring them in the door and interviewing them, if you go on LinkedIn or read Glassdoor, there are all kinds of nightmare scenarios, and you may have been in some of those scenarios where you go in for an interview and the interviewers aren't trained. They're asking questions that some are asking questions that are illegal. Some are asking questions that really don't have anything to do with the job. Some feel like they are psychologists, and so they're going to ask questions that they think are interesting or important, and using those to make decisions on whether or not to bring people in. So I want you to be aware, and if you haven't already, I would highly recommend that you train your interviewers. This is fundamental and critical because they are the first representative to that candidate who's walking in the door to understand, what is your company like? What is it like to work here? They are representing it. And if they have a bad experience with an interviewer, maybe they're not asking good questions. They're not even asking questions. Maybe they're talking more than the candidate who's coming in. That experience is really going to impact whether or not the candidate decides they're going to work for you. Now, there are some statistics around this as well. Over 75% of organizations where they are training managers are using more of a behavior-based approach. And so what does that mean? That means when you're asking questions, you're asking scenario-based questions, but you're asking about how they've done it before. So tell me about a time when you've had a challenging customer. How did you deal with that situation? What did you do? That is a better way to really get insight into what they will do in the future, because past behavior is one of the best predictors. And, quite honestly, when you're interviewing people, you're bringing them in, you don't know very much about them. And a lot of companies don't even spend much time in the interview process to really understand them. So when you're bringing people in, help make sure your interviewers are trained. You also know who is going to be the best person to interview the candidate. Now, you may have, I've seen organizations do this all different ways. Obviously, the hiring manager should be part of it. Your HR manager should be a part of it. And oftentimes to pull in someone who maybe is in a similar job to that person or has had that similar job, so they could also assess, and then the person that you're bringing in can get an opportunity to ask them what it is like to really work there. And it's an ounce of prevention, right? I have a friend, Stella, who's an employment lawyer, and she is very profitable by helping cover up mistakes that managers make. And sometimes it is in the interview process, the questions they ask. And if you're not aware even of the minimal, like things that will get you in legal trouble, that's some low hanging fruit for you. So I'd be curious, and I think we have a poll question on this one, do we? No, but go ahead and put in the chat. If any of you currently are trained in interviewing or train your interviewers as part of the process. People who are talking to the candidates that are coming in. I'm sure Fernando himself is very well versed and does a great job interviewing as the co-owner, but I'd be curious how many of you actually have gone through training yourself. I have personally created training programs around this, trained managers, and it is amazing how many, you don't know what you don't know. So giving them some basic fundamentals. Okay, manager, I'm not sure what BBI is, so maybe you can, behavior-based interviewing. Okay, I didn't know that was the acronym for it. Yeah, behavior-based interviewing is a really great strategy to help understand. And when you're interviewing, one of the other tips that I recommend is that as you're interviewing, not only asking them what they've done before, I really like to ask the question, what else did you consider? So you can find out, hey, are they a one-trick pony? Do they always do this same thing over and over? Or have they considered others? And then what did you learn from that? And how did you use that learning in a different opportunity. So you're assessing not only have they done it, but are they learners, right? Do they look back and reflect? And then you're asking, do you apply it and continuously improve? You'll be amazed if you don't ask those questions. I promise us the last couple, like what else did you consider and how have you applied it in a different situation? Those who are reflective and like to improve are going to have quick answers for it. Those who are not, they really get stuck. So interviewing is a really big piece. It's getting to know the person, make sure you do it right. The second tip I have is leveraging assessments. And I saw a statistic around assessments, and anywhere between 70 to 80% of organizations now are using some type of assessment along with the interview process, because you know what? We're humans, we're biased in our interview process. We all have preconceived notions. So yes, we can understand and kind of get that chemistry and get a little bit about their experience, but assessments are created now, and there's some really good ones out there. There's also some bad ones. So I want you to be cautious in choosing what assessments you use, but that can help you understand their behavior profile, their personality profile. So I actually work with an organization called Predictive Index, and we have assessments around behaviors and cognitive. And so the behavior assessment, there's a job assessment as well. So you identify what's critical for the job. And anytime you're using an assessment to determine employment, you want to make sure there's a valid job assessment. So you know what you're looking for, what are you measuring against? And then the behavior assessment says, you know, how close is that person really wired to be able to do that job and want to do that job, right? Because you don't want to do square peg in a round hole. It doesn't exclude them, but you get to, it also helps you in knowing what questions to ask. And then the cognitive assessment, there are several cognitive assessments out there today, but a cognitive assessment is actually the #1 predictor of performance. And the cognitive assessment is really important, especially in your jobs that are more complex. And what it measures is how quickly they can adapt to change. So when you're hiring someone externally and you're having them come into your organization, there's already going to be a change. They have to learn you, they have to learn the company, to learn the job. So the more you can get insight into how quickly they adapt and how important it is that they adapt and that there's a lot of change going on around, can help you make a better hiring decision. So look at the assessments that you might want to use. If it's, there may be, if it's a technical job, what are the technical skills that they are going to need? There are different types of assessments that can help you see, okay, do they have minimum requirements coming in that can help them be successful? The third tip I have is to leverage your network around hiring. So some of the leaders that I've been talking to that are having really problems getting people to come in or even getting people to apply. And so they're really racking their brain to say, what do I need to do? Different job fairs. McDonald's is offering bonuses just to come in and interview, right? So I recommend leverage your network, and your network can be first internally. Who's working for you now? If your employees, if you have a great environment, a great culture, a great place to work, you should be tapping into that network. You know, ask your employees, who do you know that would be great to work with? Who do you want to work beside? Bring them in. Employee referral programs are powerful as well, because it not only incentivizes them, but it helps you, you know, make sure that the employees understand that you want them to bring the right people into the organization. So leverage your internal network first. They should be, if you have the right culture, these employees are high advocates of your organization. And then leverage your external network. So you're part of Cozy, right? You should be connecting with other leaders in Cozy, other organizations as well. Give Megan a call, say, hey, I need some help. Who can I connect with? What are associations where the people I'm looking for may be associated with? So really meeting people, and a best practice is always be recruiting. When if you meet someone who you may not have a job now, but you like them, they seem a good fit for your culture, stay connected with them. So being proactive around that is really powerful. I do have one more quick poll question before I give it to Taylor. I'm curious how many of you actually have an employee referral program. it could be a formal or informal program, but some way that you're saying, hey, I care about your input. I want you to bring people in, and there's going to be some type of incentive for you to bring people in to the organization. So we're getting about 6 have responded. It'll give it about 10 more seconds. And if you're working at it as well, if you don't have one, it may be an opportunity or an option for you to think about, how can I incentivize someone? It doesn't always have to be money. There's different ways, but leveraging, a healthy company has people who their employees are advocating for it and saying, this is a great place to work. You need to come and work here. So I'm going to end the poll. And it looks like 43% do have an employee referral program. I'd be really curious. You can throw that in the chat, or we can talk a little bit at the end to see how that's working. Is it new? Is it making a difference? And then 57% said no. So it could be an opportunity for you as well. So I'm going to stop sharing here and turn it over to Taylor.
Thanks, Jill. Lot of good things in there. It's pretty easy to land yourself in hot water around interviewing if you're not doing it the right way. So it's really important to be cognizant what you're asking, how you're asking it, how it comes across, the whole myriad of things. I want to go out of the way to put a plug in for one of my friends' organizations. It's called Interview Path. They're a Cleveland-based small business that will develop custom interview guides for your organization and make sure that they are compliant. Helps you makes it really easy for your interviewers to do things the correct way. From my side of things, we each picked 3 things, and I led with the importance of being transparent about who you are as a company. So, it's so often that companies try to bring someone in and put lipstick on a pig and really make it something that seems one way, when in reality, day 1 or day 2 or week 1 will reveal who the company is as an employer. It's so important. And with this day and age of transparency, where websites like Glassdoor exist and other things, you might as well own who and what your employer brand is. So, when you're interviewing with someone, trying to make it seem like you're one thing and not the other is going to come back to bite you, because people are going to be frustrated and they are going to look to make a change more quickly than not. The other big thing there is the erosion of trust. So people are going to look and wonder if they can even trust you as their employer, which again ties back to the desire to seek a new job. So look, getting those aligned expectations is essential. It's key to the retention piece that we will talk about later. For some companies, it's easy to get them in the door, but it's hard to keep them. And oftentimes it's because the expectations with the workplace weren't aligned with what was put in front of the candidate before they were hired. So really important for all parties in your organization to be cohesive in how they're presenting the employment opportunity at your company. The next one is trust your leaders to make hiring decisions. If your organization is equipped with enough infrastructure, empower your leaders to make the hiring decisions for your organization. Whenever I conduct an interview at Rust Belt, now that we've grown out of me being the one to find the candidates to work for us, when I meet with a candidate, I'm no longer meeting with them about their qualifications for the job. I want to know the person I'm getting at that point. I trust that my managers have already screened out the people that can do the job and aren't going to waste my time meeting with the ones that can't. So by the time I'm meeting with them, it's more about how will you fit into our culture? And we get to have a much different conversation than me asking them the X's and O's of whatever their job function is. So it's super important if you have the size organization that you allow, and you empower your leaders to make the hiring decisions. And that will obviously embolden them to bring in better and more fitting people that are aligned with who and what they want them to be, as opposed to just what you may want them to be. In the last one, tying back to the interview tip that I just gave about how I approach things, is provide a safe space for the person to open up. So, when we can get in there and really just evaluate for them for a culture fit, if we can disarm a candidate who's coming into the interview and really see who they're going to be on a Tuesday or a Friday or any given weekday, we're going to get a better feel for who and what we're trying, or who and what we're going to get for our organization. So you got to find a way to disarm them, only because I see his face on the screen right now. Fernando's got a wonderful personality, and I can just see in an interview with him, it might be an opportunity to disarm and engage with your infectious personality, to where they're going to let you see who they are or who they're not, and aligning your hiring decision is key. So I just got a question from the man himself. How do you disarm? Look, at the end of the day, disarming is the same way you'd meet someone in a social setting. Well, you got to keep your guards up and interview appropriately. Finding a way to just be more conversational and less rigid and get to know the person that you're hiring is so key. At the end of the day, people, that we work with every day, we get to know them pretty extensively throughout the course of the days and the weeks that we work together, months and years. By getting a small snapshot into who and what they are, you might be able to find some commonality and really get them talking about something that's important to them and matters to them. Again, I'd refer you back to making sure your interviews know how to do this appropriately and not go off the rails here, but getting it to be a more open and engaging conversation rather than a back and forth yes or no. At the end of the day, an interview should be a conversation. That means it's a good interview. If you're just asking them questions and they answer, and you ask the next question and they answer, and so on, that's not an interview. And maybe it fits for certain companies' roles, but I can speak to my own. I'm looking for someone that can hold a dialogue and I can sit with and talk with, and a whole number of other things. So those are my three. Again, be transparent about who you are as a company, trust your leaders to make hiring decisions, and provide a safe space for the person to open up. If you can do those three things, I really think you're going to start to attract some candidates that align with your culture, and maybe not get as many swing and a miss. You might get people in that you want to be in your organization, and they're going to want to stay because they know what they're walking into. So Jill, do we want to go to our next poll question?
Sure. Let's see. Well, it's on the next topic, and it's one of my tips. So I'm going to launch this. The question is, do you provide training? We're going to switch it to retention. Do you provide training for your leaders on leadership, on how to lead? Some of us here.
Yeah, and while these poll questions are rolling in, Fernando, legitimacy, it's the same instincts you use outside of work when you run into someone at the grocery store or something. Like, you've got to have that sense, right? I mean, that comes down to that. You've got to have that.
Spidey senses, Taylor.
Go ahead.
I said Spidey senses.
Yeah, your Spidey senses. That's where the interpersonal skills come in. And with virtual interviews to disarm, for example, one thing I will always do, anyone who has ever shown up to an interview with a tie on with me, I say, hi, nice to meet you. Can you take your tie off? And I do. I don't even ask it as a question. I say, please take the tie off, loosen up. Like, that's not who we are here. So I don't want you to have to interview like that. They can keep their suit and their coat on. We appreciate when they do that. But the tie just creates a stiffness in the room. So, how to disarm them. Look, to the best of the ability, like, I'm trying to come through the screen in the same way as if you were sitting across from me right now, right? It's how you present yourself, how you talk to them, how you make them feel. If they feel like, it's just a like a stack of papers and I'm going to ask you these very rigid questions, well, they're not going to disarm, right? If you can make it conversational, regardless of the medium, I think that's where you're going to drive results, to see people disarmed and bring down that anxiety level, because interviewing's scary. It's like very daunting, for some people, and some people love it, right? I always loved it, when I was doing it, but there's a lot of people out there that don't like interviewing, and it's understandable why. And the sooner you can let them show you who they're going to be post hire, that's gonna add the most value to the interview. Anyway, Jill, how's the poll looking?
I'm still waiting for a few more, and I agree. I mean, interview is an art and a science, and I agree. And that's why training is important, right? Because if you have people comfortable in it, understanding how to approach it, so they're not like rigid and asking the questions, and they're making it conversational, that can help with both. I don't know if there's any specific questions you asked to disarm, right? But that may be what they're looking for as well.
Yeah, I mean, I go outside the rails, right? Something I always ask people is, would you rather go skydiving or in a submarine? And it starts a conversation, right? They're going to pick one or the other. My answer is neither. But you know, it's just something a little zany, and it usually opens up the conversation. It takes the tie element out of it. It takes the formality out of the conversation, and it lets us start talking about something silly, as like, well, I've gone skydiving. I hated it. I blacked out for like 20 seconds of the free fall because I was so panicked, right? But it's all of a sudden we get to start talking about something a little bit more light and bright, and take it.
Putting them at 80.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So I'm not completely surprised by this. Do you provide training for your leaders on leadership? 30% said yes, 71% said no. And hey, that's my bread and butter. That's what I do. That's where I spend time with leaders. And I experienced, before I started my own business, in companies where, I mean, this was just basic. It was basic that we train leaders on how to be leaders. And that's one of my tips around here on retention strategies, because if you've ever heard the phrase, you join a company and you leave a leader, you know it's true. If I have had toxic bosses, I have had amazing bosses, and it makes a difference in how I feel at work and at home, and how productive and effective I'll be. And so the worst thing we can do is put people in a situation where they're leading others or leading the organization, and we're not giving them some basic fundamental skills. We're not providing coaching for them. We're not providing training for them. Yeah, they get promoted because they knew how to do their job. A lot of individual contributors get promoted because they're really good at getting stuff done. But that doesn't mean they're really good at coaching, empathy, emotional intelligence, leading others, setting strategy. So you want to keep people in your organization, invest in your people. And the first is, train your leaders, invest in your leaders so they know and they understand. This morning, I spent the morning with a group of leaders who, all different levels. And we talked about just some fundamentals around that. There's a real tendency to have a dislike around communication, around feedback, around confronting any situations. And so when leaders don't address issues before they become big, then they can get out of control. People can get upset. And when leaders don't take care of any situation that's happening at work with an employee, it impacts everyone around them. How many of you have ever worked where you got someone who's on your team who they're slacking, they're not performing, they got a bad attitude, and maybe you're getting paid the same or similar, and you've got to work with them, and the manager's just ignoring the situation. They don't want to deal with it. Well, guess what? Your employees have to deal with it, and it can create a toxic environment, toxic culture. And it not only, like I said, impacts how people do work, but as leaders, you have a responsibility for people, because you impact not only their income, but how they feel at home, and how they, that impacts how you treat the people around you when you go home. So training leaders to understand the importance of connecting with others, managing change, setting strategy, setting direction, and giving feedback is a real fundamental way to retain people in your organization. Right now, there's just too many opportunities. I saw a stat, there's 11 million jobs unfilled today. 11 million jobs unfilled. So there's some opportunities, and some people will stay for a while, but if they don't feel like the manager cares about them, I love this quote, Maya Angelou, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And for leaders, if you're not training them and helping them understand how to do that, here's what they'll do. They're going to do what's been done to them. And in most cases, that's not a good thing, right? So you have a responsibility to develop. And one of the surveys, another survey I saw is the number 2 reason that employees are attracted to organizations are in development opportunities. So they want learning and development, they want to grow, and that's your individual contributors as well as your managers, so they can just be better. The other tip I have is around creating a positive place to work, creating a positive place to work. So you've heard that toxic environment, right? We know what a toxic environment feels like, where people are, there's infighting, there's lack of trust, their leader doesn't give them good direction or feedback, they don't feel things are fair. That creates that toxic environment where if you feel like Sunday night that you are dreading going in Monday, you may want to reevaluate where you're working. And if your employees are feeling like that as well, you're not going to get the best out of them. So a positive place to work is one where there is fundamental trust in the organization. So I trust the leadership of the organization, that they know what they're doing, they're setting the right strategies, they're communicating openly and honestly, they're authentic, like Taylor said. I know what I'm getting. They're not just showing a facade. They're really honest with me. They're showing their strengths as well as their weaknesses. They're letting us know when the corporation's going good and bad. And we're really rewarding positive behaviors. And not only are we rewarding positive behaviors, which could be, working well together, hitting the key targets, helping each other, but when we see distracting behavior, derailing behavior, that's addressed right away. And I'm not saying publicly address and publicly flogging, that's completely inappropriate, but a manager is seeing the situation and they're taking the employee aside and they're giving them that counseling they need and helping them understand what's expected. And they're not tolerating that bad behavior in the organization, because you know what? Life is short. Life is short. We should work in a place where we feel good. And as leaders, you have a massive responsibility to create a positive environment. I'll go back to my friend Stella, who, she gets called when the yogurt hits the fan. And 9 times out of 10, it's the manager, foot in mouth. The culture is not right. So create the positive work environment. It's not only help you be more productive, but you're going to reduce your implications for lawsuits, because those are very expensive. So if you're thinking, I can't afford leadership training, I'm telling you what, right now, you can't afford not to. The third tip I want to give you is around stay interviews. So you may have heard of exit interviews, where those are pretty common, right? Someone's leaving and, maybe we give them a survey, or maybe we ask them, what was great? What did you hate? 9 times out of 10, you're not really going to hear the truth, because people, you really shouldn't, really burn your bridges, but they're not going to be really honest. They're like, I'm already out of here. I'm gone. I don't really care that much. And it's too late to do something, right? So a positive, proactive way to see how can we retain people, how are they feeling right now, checking in with them, or stay interviews. And it's asking very similar questions. So it's asking, hey, tell me, what do you love about working here? What's great about working here? Not only will you understand what motivates them, what they love about it, but then that's the advertisement that you can give about why work for us. Hey, these are benefits I didn't even think were important, but now you know, and say, hey, what do you think? What are some improvements that we could make that would make things better? And then here's my golden question for you. I love this question, and you're going to get so much from it. Ask them, what would it take for a recruiter to say to keep you on the phone to consider another job? You will learn so much with that question. You will learn, because guess what? If you think the recruiters aren't calling them, you're out of your mind. Ask Taylor. That's his job. His whole company is about talking to your employees.
Jill, you changed my company when we were preparing for this, and we brought up that, that question. I mean, I went to our next senior leadership team meeting, and I was like, we are doing this at the end of the year, and we are asking this a very specific question, because I love it. I think it just, yeah. And that's the gold, right? Like, let's make sure to emphasize, if you guys take anything out of this presentation, I think, Jill, you've prepared a lot of great nuggets, but I think there's magic in that question. I think there is magic in that question. I would ask that
you repeat the question, Jill?
Yeah, just so everyone gets it, because it's so important and so good.
Yeah. So what would it take? What would a recruiter have to say that's calling you that would make you consider staying on the phone with them? What would they have to offer? What would they have to tell you? Because that's when you really know what's important. I used to ask this to our high potentials, and I would find out 9 times out of 10, it wasn't money. It's like, hey, I really, want to get a promotion. I want to get involved in bigger projects. I want to be able to do this. And there are things you can do, but you'll never know if you don't ask. So thank you. So Taylor, I see a lot of, are there questions in the chat or comments in the chat? Do we need to address that before you jump into yours?
Marie, I love that comment. That's awesome. No, I think it's good for me to jump in again.
Okay.
That stay interviews topic. What would keep you on the phone? I think that's gold, and that hopefully benefits some others on this call. There's who knows, if the person's making 40K and they're like, well, if they told me they were making 140K, you might not be in danger. But if they said, I need to make 42K, then you might want to evaluate if you want to get them there, or what it might be, right? So that's a really good tidbit.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a lot
So
cheaper to keep them than to buy new ones, right?
yeah, absolutely. The cost of onboarding them, getting them up to speed, and then hopefully having them be a good fit is going to take way longer than the small bump, the $1 an hour bump in pay. Look at the one of the ones that what stood out to me when we were preparing this was to constantly be evaluating your workplace and what the current culture is. So, culture is it's the cool word of the last 5 to 10 years. It's what everyone's focusing on. You're trying to develop a strong and authentic culture that fits the people that you want to attract, right? And it is your employer brand. But any change in focus on that, it can leave you open for cracks. If I stop, if I were to leave today and be like, you know what, I'm going to be back at the end of Q1, keep the culture going the exact way that it is, I would trust that the people I have would definitely carry the flag. But little things that I might have seen otherwise might start to emerge, and those things, can become such big issues so quickly, that just constantly having your pulse on your culture, how people are treating each other, it's head on a swivel type mindset. That is really important to being able to once again retain the people that you want, and avoid the cracks in your foundation as an organization. The next one is little investments can yield big returns, right? Everyone's trying to, like, depending on the type of business you're in, you might think you have to have a president's club where you take the best performers to Tahiti. It's not the case. It might be little acts of love. Today I walked in and said, can we buy the team lunch today? Right. And we're actually going to do it Monday, just logistically, but I don't know. Like, I'm not worried about a budget. I'm not worried about anything. I just thought it'd be nice to buy them lunch. Right. And it cost me $100 or $130. It doesn't matter. It's if it fills their bellies and makes them feel a touch more appreciated, then it's worth its weight in gold. Right. So little acts of love that show you care, even just the way you support and treat people when they're in a challenging time, right? The way that they are, the way that they are left to feel. If someone's going through something difficult at home or with their family or something, can I meet you with, working some 6-hour days this week instead of 8, so that you can have a little margin in your life to just get some things done that might be, I'll tell you what, that 2 hours a day that they might be struggling is going to get lost on them anyway, because they're just there mentally and emotionally fried. So just be cognizant about the holistic picture and how those little investments of love and kindness and caring to your culture can go such a long way. And, it again doesn't have to be the President's Club trip to Tahiti. It can just be, something that you are, authentically looking to do for people. And then the last one is vulnerability amongst leadership. Be open, honest, and transparent amongst your team. We are all humans, and the more we let our peers and subordinates in, the sooner we can become a team, right? I'm kind of reading what I wrote, but your role as the leader does not have to come with a suit of armor. You're in there working alongside your team every day, especially in the world of small business, fulfilling your respective role. People are just people. Trust them to see your flaws and sharing your challenges as a leader, right? Like by talking to a team and saying, I'm struggling with this, right? You don't have to be strong and perfect and buttoned up all the time, right? Your team might be able to say, I can help you with that. Like, I know that's your job and I know what my job is, but like, I've done that before, or I know someone who can help you. I can do a lot of things to get you to where you want to go, right? Leadership, we put on these suits of armor that make it seem like we have to be more knowledgeable and more buttoned up than anyone that comes into our sphere. But it couldn't be further from the truth, right? At the end of the day, you need each person on the team to do what they do well, but also be comfortable saying, can I support you? Or can I work across the aisle with you and help you as well?
I love that, Taylor, because not only is that true that, hey, we're not perfect, but guess what? They know you're not perfect. So don't think you're fooling them, right? So being honest and open,
and then, Chandra, I'm reading your comment. I respectfully disagree. I've developed a great culture very intentionally. And I've dictated like where the direction of that culture is going to be with core values and integrity and a whole number of other things. So I think you're completely wrong, that you're going to keep the people who you attract by focusing on what you want your culture to be, and then attracting the people that want to be in that culture. So we've been very intentional with dictating our culture, and it has worked out fabulously for us. Do you want to go to poll question 3, Jill?
I think we did all the polls.
Okay, cool.
Training, referrals, biggest challenge. Yep. So what do you guys think? What challenges are you facing? What questions do you have? Any comments on recruiting or retention?
I have a question for you. With this transition to virtual as well, you talk a lot about culture, you talk a lot about training. How do you think that has had to shift or change, especially as you have people not always in the same office together? They're working at their own homes. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you keep people kind of engaged and connected to the organization?
Yeah, I'll take that one. You can chime in too, Taylor. Right? So I do a lot of virtual training, virtual leadership training, team building events virtually, because there's a lot of organizations who are still not bringing people back. But what we know is that there's some starvation there for connection with people. And the trend that we see going forward in 2022 is that you need to be much more intentional around, even if it's, limited time when you're bringing people together. It's not just to sit in the same offices and work, but let's build them better to start building relationships and getting to know each other. And so if you can't do that face-to-face, then be really intentional. And there are all kinds of ways that you can connect people that aren't just everybody sitting staring at a Zoom video, where you're sharing, people are talking about things that are not necessarily work-based, that they're talking about their values, they're talking about other experiences to get to know each other at a deeper level, because that's been a gap for people. A lot of companies have been onboarding people that they've never even met anybody in the company except in a video around that. And I think that's a huge challenge. And your connection with them is even further away. So retention risk is a lot higher. So leaders are going to have to get much more creative in how they connect with people and more intentional around it. And it's not always on a Zoom, but sometimes it's just picking up the phone, find out what their interests are. Like Taylor was offering to buy lunch. Maybe it's sending their favorite Starbucks to them, or, dine and dash to their house. So it's even personal to them.
Yeah, it's become such a the business has become so different, right? And I'm early enough in my career that I only have so many chops with it. But certainly the emergence of culture as a priority has become paramount, and the way you think about your people is tremendous. I think we're seeing examples of companies that are now offering stipends to help people set up their workspace more effectively, because we've shifted to a more virtual or remote environment, right? We're anytime someone starts with us, we're always willing to buy them an external monitor for their home, right? To go with the one they have here at the office, or just the supplies they need to be successful. At the end of the day, those things are going to set them up for success. And so it's the least we can do. But even if it's, I think like businesses emerge that would send like gift baskets of like healthy snacks during the pandemic for remote workers. And, there's so many opportunities to do little things. It comes back to what I was saying, Jill, earlier. Just doing little things can go such a long way in retention. It's not always the big raise. It's not always the trip to Tahiti. It is the little things that go such a long way.
That's where you reach out to Fernando's organization and order some swag.
Yeah,
makes you feel
absolutely.
special,
Fully promoted.
as the company name on it.
Hey, thanks for the pitch, guys.
That's cool.
Hey, on a serious note here, do you guys see as a trend that, because one of the things I notice about these companies, obviously small businesses like ours, we cannot afford to work virtually. We just can't. A lot of us need to be in the same environment. And a lot of our clients, bigger clients, typically with 50 plus employees, have gone to this hybrid scenario. And I'm hearing from, because as you guys know, I know a lot of business owners, right? Some of them are worried about the maintenance of the company culture and values because of what you just said. Johnny, Mary, Peter, and Paul just joined, and they don't know anybody in the company. They've been working virtual for 10 months, right? Do you see this as a trend that continues longer term, this hybrid model? You guys are closer to the mega trends than.
We're never going back. If that helps you. I'm at my office today. I got my team out here in front of me. We're in on Mondays and Thursdays, but we're never going back to 5 days a week. I try to not speak in absolutes, but I don't see a world where I really want to be in 5 days a week. And I know my team values that as well. Maybe we'd get to 3 and 2. We're currently into a remote 3, but for right now, I do think the world has changed.
What about you, Jill?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm seeing that as well, that those are the big trends. And there's a lot of people who they like that remote. It gives them the flexibility, and companies, honestly, especially the bigger companies, are going to save a lot of money on having this big office space and, traveling and commuting. And it opens up the whole world of possibilities and what talent that you can attract. But that does mean it's going to be, I was talking with, an executive I was coaching the other day, and the struggle with him was, gosh, I used to get this kind of FaceTime with the CEO, the water cooler talk. You don't get that anymore. So the challenge, I don't
How do you bridge
now,
that?
but that's the challenge.
How do you bridge that gap, right? Because the water coolers conversations are important because they're relationships, right?
Yes. And people are really missing that because they're used to it. I don't know the answer. I think that
I don't either.
Yeah.
It
'Cause you
was so
can't-
funny
you
how
have to
the
do-
Megan, what's GCP doing? What's the, you as leader of the organization there? What are you guys doing longer term?
So implemented a new remote work policy. So people who wanted to work from home had the ability to apply to work 2 days from home. And I will tell you, like 80% of the staff decided that they wanted to work from home. But I think that's also, and not to complicate this conversation, but I also think it's a generational thing too. I mean, I'm a very, very traditional worker. I love being in the office, sitting at my desk, dressing up. But a lot of the younger people on our team really like to have the flexibility to work from wherever because they have the ability to do so and they're getting the work done. And so I think it's a shift in that perspective also about where people can get work done and how hard they're working. And it doesn't matter if they're in the office versus at home versus at a coffee shop. They're still getting everything done that they need to get done. Then I think it's okay to make that shift.
Yeah.
That's gonna be, whoever comes up with that answer. And that's something I've been thinking about is that hallway conversation. How do you replace it? How do you replace the?
Well, I was laughing when you started, Fernando, when the pandemic broke out. I forget what our cadence was, but probably 4 days in, 1 day remote. But we weren't really set up holistically. And then when the pandemic broke out on March 16th, we figured out how to do it in 6 hours, or at least iteration one. And I was just laughing because we used to have 3 team Zoom calls a day, a morning to start, a lunchtime, and then a dinner. So we were hosting 15 meetings a week, and like we were all losing our marbles quick. And we got it down to like 1 or 2 ultimately. And then of course the doors opened back up when we were able to reconvene. But that interpersonal connection, man, we did not want to lose it. That was for sure. So yeah, like was said, if someone can figure out how to really bridge that interpersonal gap in the remote environment. I think Zuckerberg's trying to do it with his whole metaverse. So that's where you're going to hang out soon, is in the metaverse.
Well, and we actually had a presentation yesterday on a different topic, but the woman who was on the panel is from Zephyr Recruiting. I think, Taylor, you might know Erin Longwood.
Yeah.
And she had talked about, she assigned somebody on her staff. They've always been a virtual team. And there's somebody on their staff is kind of the chief fun officer, probably not the right title, but their job is to design ways that the team is connecting on a regular basis. So they'll do things like, hey, we're going to have this chef from Thailand teach us all how to, make these special dishes, and we're all going to do it together, even though they're all going to be virtual in different spaces. But creating those other ways of bonding virtually, where you're doing something together, but not in person, but it's still something that you talk about. It's something that the team is coming together around and having fun. Is a way that she's been able to kind of keep her team connected, even though they're actually across the country.
Smart. Yeah. And that's the team building, but it's still like just those connections with people that are informal. It's
cool.
Any other questions before we close? Thank you, Taylor and Jill. This has been wonderful, wonderful content. And I'm glad that we recorded it so we can share it with the rest of the Cozy membership. Any last words from you two?
well,
No, just be intentional. Take care of that culture that you've worked so hard to bring together, and constantly be watering it, and treat people the way you'd want to be treated in the hiring process. Be intentional about it, and if you're getting good people through the door, and then you have a good place to work, that's the magic formula. And if you can do all that well, you'll grow like everyone else.
absolutely. I fully agree. One of the pictures in my mind that Taylor, when we were talking about this before, was, you could have the best recruiting process in the world, but if you don't have the right culture and you're retaining them, it's like you're putting them in a colander and they're going to fall right back out. Right. So build the culture, have that right culture first. That's going to attract people. Thanks so much for letting us share. I know.
Yeah, thank you for just letting us share. It's our opinions, right? It's best practices that we've seen. But hopefully some of this helps you guys. And for the last time, make sure to ask that key and golden question in stay interviews, right, Jill?
Yes, the golden question. And it's free to you.
All right.
Thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.